Hello, and welcome to a new podcast called On Screen and on the Spectrum, the Representations of Autism in Media. I'm your host, Annabelle Underwood, and today we are joined by filmmaker and disability consultant, Jeremy Andrew Davis. Jeremy was named one of LinkedIn's top voices of disability advocacy, has amassed a large audience on social media with over 350,000 followers on TikTok, and won Best Family Short Film in the 2019 Canton Film Festival with her short Monsters. He also created a short film called Sensory and Sensibility for the 2023 Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, where participants have 5 days to produce a short film. Recently, Sensory and Sensibility premiered at the opening night of the Marvels of Media Festival as part of a selection of short films about romance and dating created by autistic filmmakers. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
For those who haven't seen your latest short yet, can you give a little summary and tell us a little bit about your experience producing it?
Sure. So I made it for, like you said, the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, and I signed up late because I didn't really have a crew or anything lined up. But I thought to myself, I'm doing these social media videos all the time where I'm oftentimes playing two characters that are talking to each other in a scene. I'm like, well, I could do that. So on the first day we got the prompt, and for the first 4 days I completely blanked on any ideas. But, you know, it was always percolating. And then on the fourth day, I came up with the idea of like, what if I show the internal monologue of an autistic person on a date? Because we often see representations or even just like documentary or whatever style of autistic people being, quote, awkward. But when we hear the inner thoughts of what's going on, it makes total sense. It doesn't seem awkward. So I wrote a script. I filmed it in one day with my wife on teleprompter. And I shot it in a one shot. So it's a one single take, no edit, and submitted it the next day.
Yeah, I think it it really connects with what you do on like social media, how like an idea comes and then like there it is. And I like really appreciated the like vulnerability of it. And personally like definitely found that inner monologue very relatable. So I was wondering like why you decided to be so open about your experiences as a disabled person, like even though disability can be so misunderstood in the industry.
Being silent about it wasn't helping me either. It's a double-edged sword where when you're silent about it, you don't get accommodations.
Yeah.
And a lot of the disability elements present themselves in ways anyway. So you're still experiencing the ableism. And being able and being in a position in my career where I had the ability to talk about it, I started doing so. Excuse me. But I also, in my personality, I have a hard time not talking about things. So that's another element that other people may not experience. There are definitely other people who are far more private or who are in situations where talking about their disability can make things worse. And so I don't want to go like, hey, yeah, we need to be open and talk about this. It's just that's where I am in my career. And it's taken 41 years to get there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And another example of like that openness, you've been posting about how you're experiencing like some internalized ableism around traveling to this recent festival. And I think like a lot of people in the comments were really like I totally get this. Like
Yeah.
me personally, like traveling has always been something that's difficult. I think inherently it's like a lot of change, a lot of unexpected things come up. So like I totally relate to it being like very disorienting. And I was wondering how you navigate advocating for accommodations while also managing like that internalized ableism.
Yeah. One day at a time, I guess. And I'm always working on myself. I'm just, it may just be a part of who I am, or it may be a part of my conditioning. I don't know, but I'm always like turning to look inside to go, what's happening? And I think that may be a coping mechanism because in the environments in which I grew up, I had to constantly look at what I was doing that was causing the environment around me to be unsafe. And so now that I'm stepping into more of places of having power, I can use that to shape the conversation or the area in which I'm in to make it accessible instead of that. And so I'm constantly bumping up against like, oh, I'm advocating for this for my environment, but I have that to address in myself. So yeah, it's an uncomfortable process. I in my social media videos where I'm playing two or more characters, I took that approach partially because I wanted some separation from my real life. So in my screenwriting, I like to say that I use fiction to tell the truth. So I'm putting a little bit of a buffer between some of the scenarios that I'm writing as a scene and acting out.
Yeah.
But as I was going on this trip, I wanted to make content around my experiences and sharing some of the vulnerability, like me crying and me breaking down in the airport and things like that. And the worst parts of it aren't filmed because I'm broken down too much.
Right.
And it is scary to put that on the internet, especially because I expect there to be trolls that are outside of our community who are like, oh, look at that dude crying. Like, you're such a whatever insult. But on the other hand, for me, those kinds of trolls are real easy to brush off. It's more people within the community that might have criticisms and things like that that are harder. But yeah, especially meeting so many people on this trip and hearing the personal stories of how some of my content has made an impact. It's so easy just to see like, oh, that video got that many numbers of views. So seeing those, hearing those stories was like, oh, yeah, this vulnerability is making a huge impact that I wasn't even realizing the depth of, and it means a lot, but it also like emboldens me to be more vulnerable and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so nice to like get to meet people who are actually like interacting with your work in person. Yeah. I imagine it feels like a lot different than like interacting with people through a screen.
Yeah. Especially with comments, they got to be short,
Right.
things like that. So it's great to get comments of like, oh my gosh, this video meant so much. But when you're standing face to face with someone and having that interaction, it's just a whole different level. And yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I also wanted to ask about, you recently posted about an experience working as a PA for a movie. I think it was called Unstoppable. Right? Yeah, and I was just thinking how like it's really eye-opening to how inherently ableist the industry can be. Would you like to like summarize that experience for the
Yes.
listeners?
So not 100% on dates. I think Unstoppable came out around 2011. So we were filming the year before in my area in Ohio, and I got in as a PA. They weren't hiring crew, but I had a serendipitous meeting where I got hired as a PA. And I had a lot of digestive distress at the time, a lot of the health stuff that I've been able to get treatment for to manage at the very least, I didn't have back then.
Yeah.
And so I had severe irritable bowel syndrome as well as fibromyalgia and some other things. And it turned out to be a 16-hour day, as is typical. And it completely wiped me out. I wasn't able to work I wasn't able to get out of bed for like a week or two. But on set, there's just the structures of how sets are organized causes so many barriers. So like with irritable bowel syndrome, I had to bring all my own food. And even then, I'm having gastric distress.
Yeah.
And my position was directing traffic between base camp and where they were filming, which was a little less than a mile away, maybe. So they'd call over the radio and say, lock it up. So I'd stop traffic. They'd do a take and then say, let them through and okay, come on through. So a very necessary position, but also, just like stopping traffic.
Right.
So I'm maybe a little more than a half or a little less than a half mile away from either set or base camp. And that's where bathrooms are.
Right.
So it takes me, I don't know, 10 minutes or so to get to base camp because it's not just like a straight shot. We were filming at a train depot, and so there's trains in the way, there's all sorts of stuff. And bathroom breaks for 15 minutes. Takes me 10 minutes to get there.
Right.
I wait in line. Then with irritable bowel, you may be on the bathroom for 10 minutes if you're lucky. You may have, if you're having more gastric distress, it can be 30 minutes or more.
Yeah.
And urgency and all that kind of thing. And so I managed uncomfortably, but I managed. I was late back to my position, yelled at over the radio, and and of course the radio is going over to every single person on set with however many hundred of people are there. And just really inaccessible. And so the bathroom's the issues, the food's the issue, the exhaustion's the issue. So all of those combined, I couldn't do I couldn't function for more than a week afterwards. And so Keely Cat Wells actually posted a video of a talk she was giving recently where she talks about how so many industries, but especially the film industry, entry-level positions are built around longevity, not skill. So like, what's your stamina? Can you do this for long enough to prove yourself to be able to move up the ladder? And for people with disabilities, many of us don't have that kind of stamina, or there's other barriers as well with accessibility. And so when the bottom rung of the ladder is out of reach, it's pretty easy to understand why there's so few disabled people working in Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've also talked a bit about like how inherently difficult like the whole networking and interviewing and pitching, like especially for someone who's autistic or has anxiety, social anxiety, like those things are really not built for those kind of people.
No.
Yeah.
This trip has been amazing because being one of the featured filmmakers and the audience that's coming to this film festival is audience that is mostly familiar with my work. There's a good percentage of people who are coming who know who I am. And so going to the meet and greet was easy because I'm not having to step into conversations and start things and like, who are you? I have to explain everything that I do. I don't know if I'm going to be met with ableism or when I am met with ableism, like dealing with the emotional response to that and how do I respond and then stumbling over my words and being judged and all that kind of stuff. So coming to this film festival, it's just like, oh, this is a space for us.
Yeah.
And it seemed just to flow because whenever I'm talking and I'm like, oh, I did something awkward. Oh, wait, I'm around safe people.
Yeah.
And then somebody else does something that would be considered elsewhere as awkward. We can, communicate empathy and acceptance.
Right.
So it's just like so transformative and so immensely different.
Yeah.
In fact, this time last year, I met a friend at the Cleveland International Film Festival where he was presenting his disability film. And we were in one of the networking rooms and talking to people. And it drained me so much. And like afterwards, I'm shaking and all this kinds of stuff. And he's a very outgoing and personal person. So like he's approaching straight, hey, how you doing? I'm like, I am so glad I'm with him.
Yeah.
He's actually filming his feature film right now. His name's Miles Levin, and he's making a film about his experiences with epilepsy. And so his film, I'll do a plug for him, Under the Lights, is in production right now, based on his experiences, inspired by it's a narrative, so it's fictional, but I can't wait for the film to come out.
Yeah. I love that name, Under the Lights.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. I think it really, like, this festival, it really speaks to how, like, important those kind of events are that, like, showcase and highlight disabled filmmakers and giving them that opportunity. Like, another thing that I wrote about in my paper, like, related to this topic is how, like, those kind of work social environments are also so difficult, not only for, like, the social anxiety reasons and like the missed social cues, like that kind of stuff, but also like it's like a mindset that a lot of us just don't like subscribe to. So like you're really putting on a face, an extra face. You're being like the most like kind of superficial you can be in a way.
Yeah, here's my filmmaker personality.
Right, and you're really like advertising yourself in a sense, and like I feel like that level of like, I don't want to say fakeness, but like it kind of is fakeness. Like that doesn't come naturally so much to, I feel like, a lot of autistic people. So that's just like another barrier there. Yeah,
and there's so many different presentations of that too, where once I feel safe with someone, I'm very sociable. Other people aren't like that and are much more or much less talkative or, that kind of thing. And I want there to be accessibility where everyone, no matter what their, outwardness is like, can have these conversations in these different events and spaces where their ideas can be heard, their films can be made, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I recommend anyone watching, if you're in New York City next year for the Marvels of Media, you should definitely check it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people should definitely be like supporting those kind of events, especially when It's like a free event, and it was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's free too?
Yeah.
Wow, this is amazing.
It was great.
And the organizers did such a great job with
Yeah.
making it accessible and
Mhm.
communicating, and yeah.
Yeah. In your opinion, like, what are some other ways that ableism should, like, be addressed in the media production field?
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah.
How long do you have? I think the biggest thing is finding disabled talent and greenlighting disabled led talent.
Mm.
Because a lot of what we're seeing is filmmakers who have made films and they have a career, who are wanting to be allies, which is fantastic. But because they already have those connections, they're able to get funding and maybe celebrities in their films and things like that, which is great. But we're not seeing as many disabled filmmakers being brought into a successful career by being given those opportunities. And because, like, it is a business and these studios are needing to make money, that's the reality of it. And so putting money into an unproven disabled filmmaker is a much bigger risk.
Yeah.
And I forget who it was. Someone at the Oscars was like, instead of doing a $200 million film, do like 20 much smaller films. And I advocate for that even on a smaller level. Instead of doing like a $20 million film, give 20 disabled filmmakers $1 million to make a film. And then you'll get films that have authentic representation because we're telling our own stories. We don't have another filmmaker telling our story or their interpretation of our story.
Yeah.
And I'd love for society and culture to get to the point where ableism is so low and understanding of disability is so broad that any filmmaker can go out and make a film about disability and it's probably going to be pretty okay. Like, not that ableist. So like that would be my end goal.
Yeah.
But in order to get there, we really need to empower and fund the disabled filmmakers that are making the films. And ultimately, they're going to be doing the accessible practices and hiring the actually disabled actors to play the disabled roles and all of those things because they've had that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
And like my last real question, what advice would you give to young autistic people who want to work in the like field of media production?
Oh, this is one of the questions that I always have the hardest time with.
Yeah.
Something that I've discovered in my hitting my head against the wall to try to get through is that a lot of the advice out there may not be bad advice, but might be bad advice for you. And especially with us autistic people, a lot of the traditional advice may be bad advice for us. One example, we hear a lot in screenwriting circles of like, write every day. That is bad advice for me. That is really, I will burn out so fast.
Yeah.
And so not just because of my autism, but also because of my other disabilities, like I have to pace myself.
Yeah.
And like, I got to do the paid work too. And on the day that I do the paid work, I probably don't have many spoons left to do the creative work. And so it's a constant dance.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the, well, I'm still finding more of the internalized ableism with that. But like, that was one of the things that I had to dismantle within myself of like not shaming myself for like, oh, it's been 2 months and I haven't done any creative writing on my film stuff. But I've still been working on it. Like I'm still thinking about it, and that counts. Like circling back to the Easter Seals film that I made, those 4 days counts. I didn't make it in a day. I made it in 4 days. I needed those 4 days to percolate on ideas and have things marinate in there, you know, to finally have the inspiration of what I wanted to make.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would say, oh, that was procrastination. It's like, no, I just didn't move forward until I was ready. And then also having the ease of like, yeah, I paid to do this, but if it didn't work out, that's okay because I'm disabled and, you know, next time. So yeah, I would say my advice is to not take advice. And if you don't take my advice, then you've taken my advice. And if you do take my advice, then you've taken my advice. So I win either way.
I love that answer. That's so good. All right. And lastly, where can people stay up to date with your work? And is there anything you'd like to promote?
Sure. So I think the easiest place is to go to my website, which is simply jeremyandrewdavis.com. So that's JeremyAndrewDavis.com. It's all one word. And there's links to any of your preferred social media platforms. Most of the videos that I make get cross-posted to all of them. So you can find that there. You can also find the log lines and some little blurbs about the scripts that I've written. And then you can also see the short films that I've made, including Sensory and Sensibility. And then I guess I'll promote the next film that I'm working on, big film. I am doing Easter Seals next week. So the next 5-day challenge starts on Tuesday. But the next big film that I'm working on, excuse me again, is a feature. It'll be my first feature, and it's called Camping with Dad. And it's inspired by my experience with my falling out with my parents, but specifically my dad, and navigating the disability element there with my relationship and how the relationship affected my disability, or even flared my disabilities. And it's specific, like, if I put all of my disabilities in it, it'd be way too complex. So I focused in on the digestive disabilities, which is not something that we often see represented.
Yeah.
And most people don't think of digestive distress as a disability. Even though 40% of the American population has daily digestive distress.
Wow.
Like, does that mean that 40% of the population has a digestive disability? Because that's kind of the definition of disability. And then think of a representation of digestive distress in TV or film where it was empathetic.
Yeah. It's usually a joke.
Like, can you? So, I'm making Camping with Dad with that as kind of the focal piece.
Yeah.
Also a little bit of like trauma, well, a lot of trauma in there as well, to raise awareness of these things and also how the trauma and digestive distress can dovetail.
Great. Keep an eye out for Camping with Dad.
Yes.
Camping with Dad.
I'll be posting on my social media as news comes out and developments.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you
Pleasure
so much for
talking with
having
you.
me.
Thank you.